There it was. Right in the middle of my land stood a massive concrete structure 3 stories tall. I stood at the edge of my ranch, boots covered in dust jaw hanging open, staring at what looked like a brand new multi-level parking garage. It was by no means a small one either. This thing had floodlights, painted lines, and even a working elevator on the side. And the craziest part, I was unaware that it was under construction. I was completely unaware of its construction. There were no calls, no letters, and no warnings. I had just returned from a 2-week trip visiting my daughter in Montana. I left behind rolling fields, oak trees, and quiet. I came back to honking horns construction equipment, still parked on the grass, and some stranger in a yellow vest, yelling directions to drivers as if it were a normal Monday. "This can't be happening," I whispered. Then a woman in a black SUV pulled up beside me, rolled down her window, and said cheerily, "You must be the new HOA president. It's so great that you approved this parking project. It's already solving our overflow issues." I blinked. "What did you just say?" She laughed and pointed to the garage. "You know the parking garage for Willow Creek Hills HOA? The whole neighborhood is buzzing about it. It's genius putting it on this empty lot." "You're a hero, Mr. Sanders." My hands trembled. "Lady, this is my ranch. I'm not part of your HOA. I don't even live in Willow Creek Hills." Her smile faded. Her window rolled up. She drove off in a hurry, and that's when I noticed the sign posted on the fence. It read, "Property managed by the Willow Creek Hills Homeowners Association. There will be a fine for trespassers." I stared at it. My name was Ethan Sanders. I was a 59-year-old retired firefighter. I'd bought this 40-acre ranch with every penny I had after retiring early. My dream had always been to live a quiet life with my horses, my dog, Moose, and a barn full of peace. I had no idea how anyone, could build an entire garage on my land without telling me, but they did. And now I was standing in front of it. Dozens of cars were parked on my grass, coming in and out as if the location were a public lot. And I hadn't even unpacked my suitcase yet. What I did next would change everything. But before I tell you that, let me take you back to how all this mess even began. It started 3 years ago when I first bought the ranch just outside a growing suburb in northern Texas. Back then, the area was quiet. There was no HOA drama and no pushy neighbors. There was nothing but open land and the soothing sound of crickets at night. I lived alone and I loved it that way. My daughter Lisa visited often. She was in her mid-30s, married with 2 kids, and she always said, "Dad, this ranch is your piece. Don't ever let anyone mess with that." It's ironic that her tranquil was short-lived. The first signs of trouble came when a developer started building the Willow Creek Hills subdivision just past the dirt road that separated my land from the new neighborhoods. At first, I didn't mind. People need homes. But soon the construction got louder, the trucks got closer, and the no trespassing signs I had posted were mysteriously disappearing. Then came the visits. First, it was a young man in a button-up shirt holding a clipboard. His name was Trevor. He said he worked for the HOA and was just checking boundary lines. I told him politely to leave. Next, an older woman named Dolores arrived in a golf cart and said, "We have been considering incorporating more space for community activities. Your land looks like it's unused. Perhaps we can help manage it." I laughed in her face. I should have known that they had bigger plans. However, nothing adequately prepared me for the events that transpired during my absence. See, before I left for Montana, I had locked my gate and left Moose with my friend Hank, who lives 10 minutes away. Hank, a retired police officer with a bad knee, diligently monitors my property while I'm away. According to Hank, the gate was unlocked 2 days after I left. A group of men arrived with heavy equipment claiming the community board had dispatched them to start the work. They said you approved it. Ethan Hank had told me over the phone. They even had documents and signed permits. They looked official. "What did you do?" I had asked. I called the county, but nobody called me back. So now here I was looking at the full disaster. I was confronted with a literal parking garage on my land. And then it hit me. They stole my property somehow. Legally, illegally, I didn't know yet. However, their actions took place during my absence. They sneaked and forged papers or bribed someone and built a giant garage. I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff. While it rang, I looked up at the garage. On the top level, someone was unloading kids from a van like it was a school drop-off. That's when I noticed the name Spray painted on the top of the building in blue letters. There is exclusive parking for HOA members. We will tow trespassers away. Suddenly, someone crossed the line. The phone clicked. The sheriff's office answered, asking how they could assist me. I gave them my name, address, in a single sentence. Someone built a parking garage on my ranch, and I want them out now. The woman on the other end paused. I'm sorry, sir. Could you repeat that? I said, I growled. The HOA built a parking garage on my property, and I'm not even a member. There was another pause. We'll send someone out. An hour later, Deputy Carlson showed up. A young man with a friendly face looked confused as soon as he stepped out of his patrol car and saw the garage. You weren't joking, he muttered. Nope. He walked the property, took pictures, and shook his head. Sir, this isn't just trespassing. If they poured concrete and set up utilities, this is a major offense. But I'm going to need you to prove this land is yours. I pulled out my deed, the title, the survey, everything. Carlson nodded. I'll open a report, but I'll also need to contact the HOA and the county. The matter might go deeper than just a misunderstanding. I could feel my blood boiling. Deeper, how deep? The subsequent events led me to understand that this was more than just a garage. This incident was a setup. As we stood near the barn talking, a sleek black car pulled up. Out stepped the HOA president herself. Dolores. She was wearing a full pantsuit, high heels, and a smug look that nearly made me laugh. Mr. Sanders, she called, waving a folder. I believe we need to discuss the community development agreement you signed last year. What agreement? I snapped. She opened the folder. Inside were papers with my name and my signature. Only problem, I never signed a thing. I stared at her, then at Carlson. The deputy looked from the paper to me back and forth. Dolores smiled like she'd already won. And that's when I realized something terrifying. Someone forged my signature. Someone used my name. And someone, maybe many people, wanted me to disappear so they could claim this land. I wasn't just in a fight for my property. I was in a fight for everything. And just as I turned to speak, a loud boom echoed from the garage. Screams followed. Deputy Carlson ran forward, yelling into his radio. I spun around and saw smoke rising from the second level of the garage. Someone found themselves trapped inside, and I knew right then that this was only the beginning. Where are you watching this story from? Drop it in the comments. Drop it. We want to hear your city. Flames curled from the second floor of the parking garage. Thick gray smoke billowed into the sky as people ran in all directions, yelling, honking, and waving their arms in panic. I didn't wait for orders. I took off running. Stay back, Deputy Carlson shouted behind me, but I couldn't. My instincts kicked in. I was a firefighter for 30 years. The thick and fast smoke indicated that something possibly electrical was burning hotter than it should have. The screams indicated that someone remained trapped inside. I raced up the concrete ramp, 2 levels passing, people who were coughing and gasping. That's when I saw him. A boy barely 17 years old was pounding on the rear window of a secured van. Smoke filled the interior, jamming the doors. He found himself trapped. I reached the van and tugged hard on the handle. Nothing. Locked tight. Hang on, kid, I shouted. I looked around, spotted a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall, ripped it free and smashed it against the glass. The window shattered. I reached in, unlocked the door, and dragged the kid out just as the vehicle burst into small flames beneath the hood. He was coughing, dizzy and scared, but alive. Down below, sirens wailed. The fire department had arrived. Deputy Carlson was waving them toward the garage, his voice crackling through the radio. I helped the boy to the edge of the ramp, then turned to look at the damage. The fire wasn't massive yet, but it was enough to spread if left unchecked. The fire had destroyed the van and scorched other nearby vehicles. As I stood there catching my breath, one question raced through my head. Could you please explain how this garage managed to pass inspection when the fire trucks took over and the paramedics tended to the boy? I finally walked back down to where Dolores stood. Dolores stood with her arms crossed, her lips tightly pursed, her folder clutched like a shield against her chest. You've got a lot of explaining to do, I said. She lifted her chin. The killing was an unfortunate accident, but it doesn't change the fact that the land was approved for communal development. You're insane, I barked. You built a death trap on land you don't own, and now someone almost died. Dolores glanced at Deputy Carlson. You can't speak to me like that. I'm here on behalf of the HOA board, and we have legal documentation. Carlson frowned. That's precisely what I plan to look into. I need to act swiftly as this situation currently lacks any sense of legality. Dolores turned away with a fake smile and walked back to her car. As she drove off, I looked at the garage now roped off in yellow tape and knew the incident was more than just a case of wrongful construction. This was war. But first I had to understand how such an incident even happened. Later that evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Hank, my old friend and retired cop, while Lisa, my daughter, listened over the phone from Montana. The table was laden with papers. We had land surveys, title deeds, and county records. Lisa's voice crackled through the speaker. Dad, are you saying someone forged your signature and filed a false permit while you were out of town? I nodded. That's precisely what I'm saying. Hank rubbed his beard. I've seen dirty deals before, but not like this. Dolores and that HOA board are playing a long con. They probably filed for an easement, forged your consent, then rushed construction before anyone could question it. But it's still my land, I said. Is it possible for me to have them arrested? Hank shrugged. It all depends on the extent of the corruption. If someone from the county office assisted in approving the permits, it could lead to a complex and intricate situation. Lisa, so what now? I looked out the window at the garage. Firefighters had gone. The place was quiet now, but ugly. The place was an eyesore looming over my peaceful land like a vulture. I'm going to tear it down, I said flatly. Are you sure? Hank asked. I don't care what they claim. I'm going to find out who signed those permits, who built it, who gave them permission, and then I'll tear it down with my hands if I have to. The next morning, I went to the county recorder's office. I demanded every file related to my land permits, construction notices, anything connected to Willow Creek Hills. The clerk, a nervous young guy named Ben, handed me a stack of documents. He said that according to this document, you agreed to lease the land to the HOA for 40 years at a rate of $1 per year. I stared at him. Does that sound like something a sane man would do? He blinked. No, but your signature is here. Twice I looked down and I froze. The signature looked exactly like mine, but I never signed it. Who notarized this? I asked. Ben pointed to a name at the bottom. L. Whitmore. My heart dropped. Lena Whitmore was the HOA's legal consultant. They weren't just bending the rules, they were fabricating reality. Back at the ranch, I called Deputy Carlson and showed him the file. He whistled low. This just turned criminal, Mr. Sanders. That's identity fraud forgery and likely conspiracy to commit fraud. I'll open an investigation. You should also get a lawyer. I nodded. I've already taken action. But before I could even sit back and breathe, my phone buzzed again. It was Hank. Ethan, he said, you need to get back to your ranch now. Why a group of HOA board members has gathered on your front lawn, and they have just begun excavating a hole for a new security post at your gate. I gripped the phone tighter. What? They've brought a cement mixer. My voice was steel. Don't let them leave. I grabbed my truck keys, and as I sped down the road, tires kicking up clouds of dust behind me, one thought ran through my mind. They weren't just after my land. They were trying to erase me from it. This time, they had crossed a boundary so profound that the law might not be able to halt what I was about to undertake. As I arrived at my own ranch, my tires screeched, revealing a scene reminiscent of a nightmare. Right at the front gate of my land, a group of well-dressed HOA board members stood with blueprints in hand. Two men in neon orange vests were digging a large square into the ground, while another poured cement into a form lined with rebar. A massive sign leaned against a nearby tree. Willow Creek Hills, HOA security checkpoint. Only private access is permitted. I slammed the truck door and stormed toward them. You better stop that right now, I bellowed, my voice echoing across the land. Dolores turned sunglasses perched on her nose, lips curled into a smug smile. I'm glad you could make it, Mr. Sanders. We decided to proceed with the new security post. Residents have been asking for better patrol measures since the parking garage fire. You're not putting anything else on my land, I snapped. She didn't flinch. You don't own this section anymore. We've allocated it under easement and reassigned it to community access. That's a lie. It was a bold move. Hank stepped forward from his place by the barn. He had his arms folded and his phone up recording everything. He said, I've already sent this footage to my friends on the force. Dolores kept her cool, but her eyes narrowed slightly. You've got forged documents and fake permits, and now you're building a permanent structure at the entrance of land you don't own. I said, I'm allowing you 2 minutes to pack it all up before I get the sheriff, the news, and my lawyer down here. A nervous man in a vest looked at Dolores. Ma'am, if this is a property dispute, we might want to wait for number. She cut him off, finished the post. He hesitated. She growled, keep pouring. That was it. I took out my phone, scrolled through contacts, and tapped on my attorney, Grayson Clark. He answered on the second ring. Ethan, they're building again. Security checkpoint. Cement is being poured as we speak. Please take some photos and try to stop them if possible. We are diligently addressing the situation. Then Carlson's truck came roaring up the drive. The deputy stepped out eyes wide as he saw the half-built post and Dolores standing there like she owned the earth. He approached. What's going on now? She's trespassing again. I said she is attempting to establish private infrastructure on my property. Dolores handed him a copy of her folder again. We're simply following the approved development plan. Deputy Carlson looked at the papers, then back at her. These documents are already under investigation. Continuing work on them could land you in deeper trouble. You don't have proof they're fake. We'll find out soon enough. Then he turned to the workers. As law enforcement, I'm requesting that you halt construction until a legal resolution takes place. Refusing to stop could make you liable as well. The cement truck operator blinked and slowly turned the pump off. The workers backed away. Dolores fumed. You're making a huge mistake, she hissed. Someone had already repurposed this land. The board voted. The board filed for the easement. You'll regret interfering with community needs. Carlson raised a brow. If this land were yours, you wouldn't need forged documents. You wouldn't build without notice, and you certainly wouldn't ignore a sheriff's warning. That was when Dolores's phone rang. She stepped away to answer it, lips tight. I took the chance to walk over and snap a dozen photos of everything. Cement, rebar, construction materials, her clipboard, even her license plate. Hank kept filming the entire time. Carlson leaned over. I have a strong intuition that this situation surpasses the boundaries of HOA overreach. So do I said. You think she bribed someone at the county office? Maybe. But bribery leaves a trail. So does forgery. Back inside, I called Grayson and sent all the images. He told me he just filed an emergency motion for a stop and would be requesting an injunction to halt all HOA activity on the land until a full investigation was complete. But something still didn't sit right. Why were they so desperate? Why did they need my land so badly when they already had a whole neighborhoods to manage? That night, Lisa flew in from Montana. She hugged me tight and said, Dad, this is insane. What if they're hiding something? We sat at the dining table going over the documents again. That's when Lisa spotted something odd in the margins of one blueprint. What's that? She asked, pointing to a code scrolled in tiny print. Boozy Elsinore 07 U. Tillert Grayson, who had joined us on a video call, looked stunned when we showed him. I've noticed that code before, he said. It's a utility routing permit for underground fiber and water lines. That's not just a parking garage or a security post. That's infrastructure. The tightness in my chest increased. You mean yes, he said. They're trying to run utilities through your land, not just for their neighborhoods, possibly for commercial expansion, office buildings, shopping plazas, or maybe even private development. I felt my fists ball up. Did they really think that no one would notice? Lisa's voice shook. Dad, they might not just be trying to use your land. They might be trying to make it disappear off the record. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my barn with Moose curled up at my feet, watching the moon hang over the now dark parking garage and the cement post still half done. I realized something chilling. This wasn't a land dispute. It was a land grab. And the HOA wasn't working alone. They had partners, they had money, and they had a plan. So I made one too. But just as I finally shut my eyes, my phone buzzed again. It was a motion alert from my front gate. I pulled up the camera feed. My heart sank. A group of 4 men in construction gear were back. Only this time they were digging near my barn. The digging was taking place in the dark. No permits, no flashlights, just shovels. They were carrying what appeared to be cables. They weren't just trespassing now. They were burying something. And I had no idea what, but I was about to find out. I didn't wait to call the sheriff. I grabbed my boots, my flashlight, and my shotgun. Moose was already growling low beside me, tail stiff, ears up. I stepped out into the cold night, heart pounding, walking fast but careful, staying in the shadows. My land was quiet, too quiet. The soft sound of digging near the barn was the only disturbance. When I got close enough, I switched on my flashlight. Hands up, I shouted. 4 men froze mid-dig, shovels in hand, eyes wide like deer in headlights. One of them dropped his tool and took off running. I repeated my warning, saying, "Don't move." Moose barked ferociously and chased the runner, forcing him to trip over a pile of gravel. The other 3 stood still now, glancing at each other, breathing hard. "What are you doing on my land at night?" I asked, stepping closer, shotgun low but visible. One of them muttered that they were told this land was part of an HOA project. He mentioned that they were conducting a late-night line check for the water mains. "Who told you that?" I snapped. They didn't answer. I waved the flashlight over the hole they had dug, and there it was. A thick black cable was partially buried, brand new. Next to the cable was a sealed plastic container that had property of Silver Ridge Development, Cumbry printed on its side. "What's in the box?" One of them shrugged. "We don't know. We just plant the lines." That was all I needed. I pulled out my phone and called Deputy Carlson again. "Get back here," I said. "They're digging illegal lines behind my barn." He sighed. "I am on my way." 10 minutes later, Carlson arrived and rounded up the men. Only one had ID. The others claimed they were temps hired for cash. Carlson opened the plastic box and discovered a router, an underground camera system, and plans for a new fiber internet route that would cut straight through my ranch and extend into a commercial development lot behind Willow Creek Hills. "You have to be kidding me. He said they were turning your ranch into a silent corridor for their project." "It gets worse," I said, holding up the buried cable. "They already started." Carlson made calls, took photos, and had the 3 workers detained for questioning. He promised to issue a warrant for the worker who fled. By morning, word had already reached the HOA board. Dolores showed up again, this time without the pantsuit. She wore a hoodie, jeans, and no smug smile, just nervous eyes and tight lips. "I'd like to speak privately," she said. "No," I replied. "You speak here." Lisa and Hank stood beside me. Moose sat at my feet. Dolores took a breath. "Perhaps we started off incorrectly. We intended the development to benefit everyone. There is a bigger opportunity here than you realize." "Bigger for you?" I shot back. "It's not for me," she replied sharply. "I wasn't referring to my own ranch." "You don't understand," she said quickly. "Silver Ridge and the county are negotiating a deal. Your land connects all of it. They can't finish their network without you. They were going to offer you a cut." I blinked. "Have they already constructed a garage and excavated trenches on my property? Do you believe I would accept a settlement at this point?" She raised her voice. "You're standing in the way of progress." "No," I said calmly. "I'm standing on my property. The only progress happening now is the investigation. Rest assured, once the investigation concludes, this barn and I will be the sole entities remaining here." She turned to go, but stopped midway. "You're making a mistake, Ethan. When this all unravels, don't say I didn't try to make peace." I watched her walk off, but something told me the card wasn't her last card. Later that afternoon, I met with my attorney, Grayson Clark, in person. He came with a full printout of the county land records in a red folder labeled Easement Fraud and Infrastructure Abuse. There's a paper trail. He told me the HOA submitted documents with fake signatures. Yes, but the more profound issue is how the county's land use director approved them without flagging the discrepancies. "You think the director was involved?" Grayson nodded or paid off. He pulled out a photo. "Recognize this man. It was one of the 4 workers from the night before. In the picture, he was now wearing a county-issued badge. His name is Dave Keller. He works in land services. He's the one who filed the initial easement that allowed the parking garage project. I stared at the photo. So what do? We file a federal complaint. We involve the state attorney's office, and we get the media involved. If they were planning to use your land as a utility shortcut to enrich a private development, we need to blow this up publicly. I felt a fire light inside me. For years, I'd served as a firefighter, running toward flames while others ran away. I never thought I'd have to fight this kind of fire, political, greedy, and silent. But now it was right here at my front door. Lisa looked at me across the table and said, "Dad, let's expose all of them. Let the world see who they really are." That night, we started gathering everything. We gathered every file, photo, video, timestamp, and signature. We printed maps and compared blueprints. Hank scanned old property surveys to show that the HOA line had never extended to my ranch. Grayson contacted 2 investigative reporters from Austin who were already sniffing around for stories about land corruption and suburban development. They agreed to come by the next morning. It felt like we were finally getting somewhere. The generator abruptly stopped working. The lights flickered, then died. I walked outside with a flashlight, and what I saw made my stomach turn. I had lost 4 of my backup solar battery units. Stolen, and spray painted across the barn door in thick red letters were the words, "Get out or get buried. Out or..." I stood in silence, staring at the threat. Hank came up behind me. "This just turned criminal really fast." Lisa whispered, "Dad, they're trying to scare you off the land." Moose growled low in his throat, his fur rising. "They're not just after the land anymore," I said quietly. "They're after me." And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Fear, but it didn't last long. Deep down, I was aware of a different reality. You don't tamper with a man who has already experienced complete loss and has battled valiantly to restore it. You certainly wouldn't jeopardize a firefighter within his own territory. It was time to strike back. But before I could even lock up the barn, a bright set of headlights turned up the drive. Then another, then another. A full caravan of HOA board members in black SUVs rolled up, blocking the entrance to my property. And stepping out from the lead car was a man in a designer suit I had never seen before. He smiled coldly and said, "Mr. Sanders, I'm from Silver Ridge Corporate. We'd like to renegotiate ownership of your ranch starting tonight." I didn't move. I just stood there, arms crossed, shotgun resting in the crook of my elbow, Moose growling beside me. The man from Silver Ridge looked calm, confident, even arrogant. He walked toward me with the kind of slow swagger you see in movies, flanked by 2 other men in dark coats and earpieces. Behind them, the rest of the HOA board members stood awkwardly near their SUVs, shifting from foot to foot like school kids caught cheating. "Mr. Sanders," the man said smoothly, "name's Craig Bellamy. I represent Silver Ridge Corporate. We've been watching the situation unfold, and we believe it's time we settled things like gentlemen." I narrowed my eyes. "You mean after trespassing on my land, after forging my signature, and after building an illegal parking garage and digging up my soil in the middle of the night?" He smiled, completely unfazed. "Let's not get lost in details. You're standing in the way of a project that will bring millions to this community. This project has the potential to create jobs, homes, and infrastructure for this community. And for what? What's the purpose of an old barn? And 2 horses." My voice dropped low. "This old barn is my life. It's the only thing I've ever truly owned. My wife passed before she could retire here. My grandkids built forts in that barn. My dog was born on this land. You want to talk about numbers? I've got none. You want to talk about value? You're looking at it." Craig's smile finally cracked. He pulled a leather folder from his coat and held it out. "This is our final offer," he said. "The offer was $2 million. Clean deal. You walk away. We make the problems disappear and you retire anywhere you want. $2 million. It echoed in my ears like a siren. I could have bought a new ranch, paid off Lisa's mortgage, and started a scholarship in my wife's name. But I also knew this money came soaked in lies and poison. I didn't even open the folder. I let it fall to the ground. Craig's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Sanders." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, you did. You believed you could pile her from a man who deserved every scrap of this earth," Moose barked. Craig took a half step back. Just then, bright headlights flashed from the other side of the ranch. A white pickup truck rolled in fast. It was Deputy Carlson with 2 more patrol cars behind him. Who was sitting in the passenger seat of Carlson's truck? "My attorney is Grayson Clark." Craig turned just slightly, but his confident posture didn't fade. Carlson stepped out and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "We've filed a formal injunction against all development activities on this property until a full legal review is completed. That means no construction, no digging, and no negotiations." He turned to Craig. He also mentioned that there was no corporate muscle available. Grayson added, "We've also submitted a fraud complaint to the Office of the Texas Attorney General, and we've got the media arriving in the morning." Craig's face darkened. Then quietly he nodded to his men. "Back to the cars," he said. "Let's go." As they turned away, Craig stopped and spoke without looking back. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Sanders. We don't lose," I called back. "Then, you've never played fair." He drove off the convoy of SUVs, rumbling away like thunderclouds heading south. For the first time that day, the air felt still again. Carlson clapped me on the shoulder. "That was brave, Ethan." "Real brave," I continued. Grayson walked up beside me, briefcase in hand. "The reporters from Austin will be here at noon tomorrow. Let's ensure they have a clear understanding of the situation here." Lisa smiled. "Let's tell the world." We stayed up late that night. Hank brewed strong coffee. We moved boxes of files into the barn to prepare exhibits for the journalists. Lisa printed out maps, satellite photos, and land deeds. Grayson rehearsed sound bites. We even brought in a folding table and made a little war room under the rafters. By morning, a black SUV with News 12 Austin written on the side pulled up. Next, another vehicle arrived. Next, a van filled with camera gear arrived. They interviewed me right there under the shade of my barn next to a moose and a wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Sanders Ranch, Esther, 1994. I told them everything about the parking garage, the forged signatures, the underground cables, the threats, the night digging, the corporate bribes, and the parking garage fire. Lisa shared her side. Hank gave them footage. Even Deputy Carlson provided a short statement confirming there was an active investigation. By the time they departed, the truth had spread throughout 3 counties. But news travels fast and trouble travels faster. That evening, as we were closing up the barn, Lisa looked up at me and said, "Dad, did you hear that?" We paused. There it was again. A low rumbling hum emanated from the garage's direction. I ran up the path and climbed the ridge to look down at it. What I saw made my heart slam against my ribs. Heavy machinery earth movers and dozens of workers, all in matching Silver Ridge uniforms, swarmed the garage, setting up lights and starting demolition. They were tearing down the parking garage. Grayson, who had joined us by then, was stunned. "Could you please explain why they proceeded without waiting for the court case?" I squinted, trying to make sense of it. That's when I saw it. Behind the garage, workers are digging a long, narrow trench that stretches across the field toward my barn. "No," I whispered. "They're not giving up," Lisa asked. "Then what are they doing?" Grayson's voice was cold. "They're trying to destroy the evidence. They weren't backing off. They were concealing their activities. And if we didn't intervene, they could potentially wipe out all evidence before justice could reach them." I ran back down the hill, yelling for Carlson on the radio. And in that moment, I made a vow. If they wanted a war, they just got one. Adrenaline surged through my chest as I charged back down the hill. My boots hit the dirt hard each step, kicking up dust behind me. I didn't stop. I grabbed the 2-way radio off my belt and shouted into it. "Carlson, they're demolishing the garage and they're digging trenches straight toward my barn." I heard crackling static followed by Carlson's voice. "I'm 5 minutes out. Don't confront them alone, Ethan." But it was too late. By the time I arrived at the parking structure's edge, tall rigs had already mounted floodlights. Huge machines with metal jaws chewed through the upper level of the garage like it was made of paper. Workers in matching silver jumpsuits operated in eerie silence. There was no music, no talking, only the mechanical growls of demolition. I ran toward the nearest foreman. Shut it down. This information is evidence in an active investigation. The man didn't respond. He just looked at me, then at the crew. No one slowed down. I stepped in front of a bulldozer, waving both arms. The driver revved the engine. The adrenaline surged through me. Then Moose leapt from the shadows, barking wildly. Fangs bared. The driver stopped. The foreman finally spoke. We have orders from Silver Ridge Corporate. This structure is a liability now. The HOA transferred all rights. We're clearing it before the county files take effect. What you're doing is illegal, I snapped. The courts haven't even made a ruling. That garage is proof of trespassing, forgery, and fraud. He looked at me with an expression devoid of emotion, typical of corporate indifference. Talk to our lawyers. You'll be talking to the sheriff, I said. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights appeared in the distance. Deputy Carlson's cruiser slid to a stop near the trench, followed by a second unit and a county inspector's truck. Carlson jumped out, hand on his belt. Shut it down, everyone. Back off the machines. One of the workers hesitated, then shut off the engine. Slowly, the others followed. Grayson's car pulled up behind the sheriff. He stepped out with a rolled court order. This is a temporary injunction signed. This morning, he said, voice raised for all to hear. All activity on Sanders Ranch, including in structure removals or installations, is now under state review. Anyone continuing to work here after this moment will be considered in violation of a court directive. He handed the order to the foreman. Carlson added, that includes you. One wrong move and I'll arrest you for obstruction. Reluctantly, the foreman stepped back. The heavy equipment shut down one machine at a time until the field went quiet again, except for the low hum of tension that still hung in the air. I stared down at the partially exposed trench behind the garage. It stretched almost 20 yards toward my barn, stopping at a wooden stake marked with red spray paint. I grabbed a shovel and started digging. What are you doing? Carlson asked. I expressed my interest in uncovering their hidden intentions, and after only a few minutes of scraping away dirt, we hit something firmly. We came across a sturdy metal box secured by a lock. Carlson knelt beside me, brushing more dirt away. Get bolt cutters. A few minutes later, the lock snapped off. Inside the box were folders, maps labeled blueprints, a USB drive, and one large document titled Phase 2 Hidden Utility Transfer Approval. Grayson opened the document and swore under his breath. This case isn't just about your ranch, Ethan. This whole thing was part of a land rewrite scheme. They used your property to advance infrastructure projects without compensating for easements. The garage was a cover, something big enough to justify the underground connections. He pulled another sheet out. And look at this. Future plans show a private airstrip and commercial buildings across 5 parcels, including yours. Carlson looked stunned. They were trying to build an industrial zone through a residential district. Grayson nodded. And they needed Ethan's land to pull it off without permits. That night, back at the ranch, our barn war room turned into a press center. The reporters returned for interviews. Grayson handed over copies of the evidence to state officials. Carlson filed a full report. The scandal exploded across news outlets. One headline read that the HOA and developers were accused of a massive land fraud scheme. Another headline stated that Silver Ridge executives are under investigation after the ranch owner exposed forgery. Dolores was nowhere to be found. Word spread that she had resigned and left town. The garage, now half demolished, was fenced off by the county. A state investigator taped off the trench in May. I finally sat on my porch with Moose beside me, Lisa and Hank nearby watching the sunset. The orange light illuminated my land, the barn, the fields, and the terrible concrete mess that was soon to disappear. Lisa turned to me. Dad, you did it. I shook my head slowly. Not yet. We've got one more battle. She frowned. What do you mean? I held up the last page from the stolen documents. Although the ink had faded, the meaning remained unmistakable. The document included an emergency transfer option, full eminent domain recommendation if the owner refuses the final offer. Just beneath that, there's a prominently stamped note to be activated within 24 hours if the rancher does not comply. My heart thudded. They were going to try and take my land through the government. The law itself, not lies or bulldozers, was the weapon they would use tomorrow, and I had one night left to stop them. Morning came too fast. The wind over my fields was sharp, the sky still gray, and my bones knew something was coming. I hadn't slept. There was not even a wink. I sat on the porch with a thermos of coffee and mousse curled at my feet, watching the empty road, waiting. At 7:43 a.m., the first sign appeared. A long, black government SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly down the gravel path leading to my ranch. Behind it, a second vehicle marked with the county seal. I stood up. Hank stepped outside the barn with a shotgun slung over his shoulder. It was not raised, just resting like a promise. Lisa came out of the barn holding her phone, which was already recording. The SUV parked and a man in a dark gray suit stepped out. He was tall, clean-shaven, had sharp eyes and held a black folder in his hand. He didn't smile. "Mr. Ethan Sanders," he said flatly. "That's me." He nodded, flipped open the folder, and spoke like a machine. "My name is Robert Keene. I'm here on behalf of the County Property Division. As of today, the county has received a recommendation for the execution of an emergency eminent domain claim regarding the property known as Sanders Ranch." I narrowed my eyes. "What emergency?" He didn't flinch. "The land has been deemed vital to public utility routing and community infrastructure needs. Per Clause 5A of the Land Utility Act, and based on recent approval documents filed through the Willow Creek Hills Homeowners Association, we are prepared to initiate acquisition." Lisa stepped closer. "That's fraud. The HOA doesn't own this land. My father never signed anything." Robert adjusted his tie. "That may be true, but the legal motion has already entered the fast-track process." At that moment, Grayson arrived in his SUV, resembling a knight rolling onto the battlefield. He stepped out with a binder so thick it looked like it weighed 10 pounds. "Stop right there," he said calmly. "That emergency order is invalid." Robert blinked. "Excuse me. You filed your motion using forged permits, forged deeds, and false infrastructure declarations, all based on documents we now have in our possession. I've already submitted evidence to the state attorney's office just 15 minutes ago." Grayson waved his phone. "A court injunction was signed and transmitted to your agency blocking any acquisition of this land until further review." Robert's expression darkened. "That's not possible." Grayson smiled. "Would you like to speak with a judge for yourself?" He held out the phone. Robert stared at it for a long moment, lips pressed tight. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a pen. "I'll make a note of it," he said stiffly. He turned and walked back to the SUV and without another word drove away. We stood in stunned silence, watching the county vehicle reverse and follow them out. I felt my knees tremble, not from fear, but from relief. The final storm had passed. Later that day, the state attorney general held a press conference. The fraud investigation into the Willow Creek Hills HOA and Silver Ridge development went public. The investigation named authorities made the necessary arrests. Dolores was tracked down in a hotel in Arizona. On live TV, Silver Ridge's corporate headquarters witnessed the handcuffing of Craig Bellamy, the talking executive. Turns out this wasn't their first rodeo, but it was their last. By the end of the month, the parking garage was fully demolished by county order. The land was restored and the underground cables were removed. I was compensated not because I asked, but because the court demanded it. A check arrived with 6 figures and a formal apology. I didn't cash it. Instead, I donated the full amount to a rural firefighting initiative in honor of my late wife, who always said, "Let your blessings protect someone else." Lisa cried when she saw the letter. We rebuilt the fence around the barn, repainted the sign, and installed a new solar-powered security system, not out of fear, but out of pride. This land was ours, and it would stay that way. The press kept calling, asking for interviews. I did a few. My purpose was not to gain fame, but to convey a message. You don't need to be a billionaire to defend your land. You don't need an army to win. You just need courage, truth, and people who believe in you. Hank sat beside me on the porch one evening and grunted. "So think they'll try again?" I sipped my coffee and smiled. "If they do," I said, "I've got the whole county watching now." Moose barked once, as if to say, "Let them come." Lisa laughed and we watched the sun set over Sanders Ranch, still standing free. "Now it's your turn. Where are you watching from?" Drop it in the comments and let us know if you've ever had to stand up to someone trying to take what's yours. Because this fight isn't just mine. This fight represents every neighbor who has ever declared, not on my